Step into the shadows of a home that has no chandelier, no marble floor, no echo of grand feasts, only the crackle of a hearth, the scent of straw, and walls that have held centuries of whispered lives. In this video, we'll walk through the low doorway of an ordinary medieval family house and uncover what its humble rooms can still tell us about the people who once called it home. From the outside, a medieval family home did not try to impress strangers, it simply tried to survive the seasons. Most rural houses in England and across much of Europe followed the same humble silhouette: a rectangular frame, a sharply sloping roof, and walls that seemed to breathe with the weather. Many were timber-framed, their skeleton of oak beams visible against pale panels of wattle and daub, a mixture of woven sticks coated with clay, straw and dung. In some areas, where stone was cheap or plentiful, the walls were built from rough, uneven blocks, mortared with lime and patched with whatever could be found. The Bayeux tapestry, stitched nearly 1,000 years ago, gives us an early glimpse: small houses with centred doors, no visible glass windows, and roofs pitched steeply enough to shed the constant rain. These roofs were often thatched with reeds or straw, which gave the home a golden crown in summer, but a dark, weathered hue in winter. To the medieval eye, these homes were not poor, they were simply normal. Peasants measured comfort not in grandeur, but in shelter from wind and rain. A roof that held, walls that stood, and a hearth that could keep a fire burning through the night were worth more than carved stone or iron gates. Passing travellers might have seen such houses as unremarkable, but to those who lived inside, each wall and beam carried the weight of family stories, inherited from parents and passed to children. First impressions then were practical. Does the roof leak? Do the walls keep out drafts? Is the door strong enough to keep out animals? Beauty was a quiet bonus, found not in ornament, but in the rhythm of beams, the smell of fresh plaster, and the simple dignity of a home built by hand. Step closer and you notice the way the frame dominates the facade. In a half-timber house, the beams are not hidden, they are the house's spine, visible to all, forming a dark grid that holds everything together. Between these beams, the panels of wattle and daub or plaster are lighter, giving the building a patchwork appearance that was as much a necessity as it was a style. This was architecture born from both scarcity and skill. Oak beams were cut and shaped by hand, fitted together with joints and wooden pegs, no nails needed. The walls were then plastered, sometimes whitewashed to brighten them against the gloom of long winters. In wealthier towns, decorative patterns might be carved into the beams or painted onto the plaster, turning practicality into quiet artistry. The Book of Love, an illuminated manuscript from the mid-15th century, shows small wooden windows set into these walls, often no bigger than a loaf of bread. They swung open on hinges or, in poorer homes, were simply shuttered with a wooden plank. Light was precious, but glass was rare and costly. Most relied on horn panes or oiled cloth to keep out the cold while letting in a dim, milky glow. Entering such a home meant ducking beneath a low lintel. The doorway was often narrow, framed in the same heavy wood, and the threshold worn smooth by years of footsteps. Inside, the beams were not just structural, they divided space, supported lofts, and provided hooks from which to hang tools, herbs, or even clothes drying by the fire. This style was more than a building method. It was a visible declaration of the owner's place in the community. The half-timber house said, "I have enough to stand firm, but not so much that I live in stone." It was a middle ground between poverty and nobility, built to last in both storm and memory. From a distance, a thatched roof could look almost idyllic, its warm, straw-coloured slope rising above the hedges, catching the low sun like spun gold. That beauty, however, was a byproduct of necessity, not luxury. Thatch was everywhere because it was cheap, light, and easy to work with. Reeds, straw, or even heather could be gathered from local fields tied in bundles and layered thickly to keep out wind and rain. Its insulating power was remarkable, cool in summer, warm in winter, breathing just enough to let moisture escape. But the same softness that kept families comfortable also demanded constant vigilance. Over time, rain and frost would darken the roof, flattening the straw until it sagged. Birds and mice found it a perfect nesting place, plucking away fibres for their own shelters. A neglected thatch could rot through in a few years, and replacing it was no small task. It took skilled hands to strip, lay, and bind the new layers so water would slide away rather than seep in. Fire was the ever-present danger. A single stray ember from the hearth could leap to the eaves, and in dry weather, flames could race across the thatch faster than a bucket line could respond. Medieval towns often had regulations about chimney height or the spacing of houses to reduce this risk, but in cramped villages, one roof catching fire often meant the whole row was lost. La Mortifidante de Vaine Plaisance, a 15th century manuscript, shows roofs worn thin, plaster crumbling from walls, and wooden repairs nailed awkwardly in place, a visual reminder that upkeep was a constant battle. The thatched roof was not just a feature of the medieval home, it was its crown and its curse, a reminder that beauty in daily life often came hand in hand with fragility. Step over the threshold and you enter a single open room, a space that must serve as kitchen, workshop, dining hall, and bedroom. This was the open hall layout, the heart of most medieval family homes before chimneys and upper floors became common. Here, life was lived without partitions. The hearth, often set against one wall, sent its smoke upward to escape through a hole in the roof or a narrow vent. Without a chimney, smoke drifted through the room in a hazy layer, blackening beams and stinging eyes, yet it also served as a kind of preservative, keeping wood dry and deterring insects from stored food. In the Très riche Heure du Duc de Berry, we see a scene of domestic life where clothes hang from pegs, cooking pots dangle from iron hooks, and wooden stools cluster around the fire. Every inch of the walls was used, herbs hung to dry, baskets stored tools, and shelves held the few treasured possessions a family owned. Privacy was almost non-existent. Children played at their parents' feet while animals, chickens, sometimes even goats, might be brought in during harsh weather. Sleeping mats could be rolled up by day to make space for work, and large chests doubled as seating. The open hall encouraged togetherness, but it also meant constant noise and movement. Work never truly stopped. The same table might hold bread dough in the morning, sewing in the afternoon, and be cleared for supper at night. In a world without corridors or closed doors, the open hall was more than architecture. It was a statement about life itself. Everyone's presence was everyone's business, and the home was a shared body, each person its heartbeat. In a medieval peasant's home, light was a luxury measured in inches. Windows, if present at all, were small, often no larger than a man's handspan, framed in wood and set deep into the wall. In poorer houses, they were nothing more than open shutters that could be closed against wind or rain. Wealthier households might stretch to cover them with panes of horn, scraped thin until translucent, or oiled cloth that let in a milky glow. True glass windows made of tiny diamond-shaped pieces joined by lead strips were rare treasures reserved for manor houses and churches. Most daylight came from the open door or the flicker of the hearth. This meant that on winter mornings, interiors remained in shadow, the walls seeming to dissolve into darkness. The air was heavy with the mingled scents of wood smoke, drying herbs, and earth from the packed floor. Ventilation was equally modest. A home might have a louvered vent in the roof or a small opening high on the wall to release smoke, but drafts were unavoidable. In summer, the breeze could be a relief. In winter, it was a thief stealing warmth from the fire. Light in this world was precious enough to shape daily rhythms. Work that needed clear vision, mending clothes, carving wood, was done near the doorway during daylight hours. As dusk fell, the room's centre became the stage, lit by fire and, if the family could afford it, by the steady glow of tallow candles or an oil lamp. The difference between a poor home and a well-off one was visible even in shadow. In a richer house, polished brass or pewter could catch and scatter the light. In a poorer one, the darkness clung, interrupted only by the red pulse of the hearth. The hearth was not just where the cooking happened, it was where life itself was anchored. A medieval family's day began and ended here, with the fire smouldering at its core, positioned against a wall or, in older designs, in the very centre of the open hall. The hearth gave warmth, light, and a constant sense of security in a world where winter could kill. Cooking was done in iron pots suspended from hooks or set on tripods above the flames. Long-handled ladles and wooden spoons rested nearby. A simple iron spit could roast meat. A flat griddle could bake oatcakes. Bellows hung ready to coax embers back to life, and a small pile of kindling waited within arm's reach. The Hours of Catherine of Cleves offers a vivid picture. A painted domestic scene with a kettle over the fire, a wooden tub beside it, shelves stacked with pottery, and a simple chair drawn close for comfort. Walls were often plastered to help reflect the glow, and the smoke-blackened beams above testified to years of fires that had never truly gone out. But the hearth was also a social magnet. On winter nights, the family gathered here to talk, mend tools and share food. In the glow, faces softened, and the worries of the day gave way to the small rituals of warmth, stirring the pot, turning the spit, banking the embers before sleep. Its position in the home spoke volumes. In an age without central heating, the hearth's reach determined where you could work, where you could sit, even where you dared to sleep. It was the invisible boundary of comfort. To lose the fire was to lose the home's heartbeat, and so it was tended like a living thing, fed, guarded, and passed on from one generation's hands to the next. In a medieval peasant home, bedroom was not a separate space. It was simply the corner where the bed stood. For the poorest families, sleeping meant rolling out straw-filled sacks or wool-stuffed mattresses on the floor near the fire, so warmth could be shared through the cold night. The wealthy, by comparison, might have a curtained bed frame, raised off the ground to keep away damp and pests, its posts carved and its mattress layered with linen sheets and wool blankets. Most families slept communally. Parents and children might share the same large bed, or the older children might sleep in a loft under the roof while the youngest stayed closest to the hearth. Privacy was minimal. The warmth of bodies mattered more than the separation of space. In winter, sleeping fully clothed was common, with hats or hoods pulled low to conserve heat. Bedclothes varied with status. In better-off homes, mattresses were stuffed with feathers rather than straw, and blankets were dyed with rich colours. In poorer homes, coarse wool or even animal skin served as coverings. The frame itself, if it existed, often doubled as storage. Chests at the foot of the bed held clothing, tools or valuables. Beds were not only for sleeping. In many households they were a place to nurse infants, tell stories, or even conduct business with neighbours who dropped in. The bed was a private comfort in a public room, a space where the day's labour ended and the night's rest began. It was a reminder that in the medieval world, intimacy and necessity walked hand in hand. Furniture in a medieval family home was modest in both number and form, built to be durable rather than decorative. The essentials were simple: a sturdy table for meals and work, benches or stools for seating, and a chest for storing clothing and valuables. For wealthier households, the table might be covered with a linen cloth and set with pewter plates, ceramic pitchers, and the occasional glass vessel. A high-backed chair, often reserved for the head of the household, was a mark of status, while others made do with backless stools. Storage was precious. Wooden chests were the main solution, heavy and lockable, serving both as safekeeping for goods and as extra seating. Shelves might be built into the wall to hold pottery, candles, or tools. Baskets woven from willow or reed were used for everything from carrying vegetables to storing wool. In richer homes, furniture could be painted or carved with decorative patterns, and colourful cushions softened the hard wood. The poor had little ornament. Planks joined with nails or pegs were left bare, their surfaces worn smooth by the years of use. Every item had to justify its place. A table might host meals, serve as a workbench, and even support a child's pallet at night. A chest might hold clothes in summer and grain in winter. Space was too valuable for furniture to be idle. The furniture told the story of a family's life. The worn seat where a mother nursed her child, the chest that travelled with a bride to her husband's home, the table around which generations shared bread. In a world without abundance, these objects were not just possessions, they were companions, built to last and to be remembered. A medieval family home was not just a place to eat and sleep, it was also a workshop. The tools kept inside were the lifeline of survival, each one tied to a skill that sustained the household. In one corner might stand a spinning wheel, its wooden frame polished by years of use, alongside a distaff and bundles of carded wool. A loom, if the family could afford one, dominated the space with its upright frame where cloth for clothing or blankets slowly took shape under practiced hands. Men's tools were often for woodwork or repairs. Axes, adzes and saws hung on the walls, ready for use in mending fences, shaping beams, or fixing carts. Knives were universal, used in the kitchen, the yard, and at the workbench. In wealthier homes, finer tools were stored carefully to prevent rust. In poorer ones, they might simply be hung in reach, worn and patched, but still serviceable. Cooking tools were just as vital. Iron pots and pans, wooden ladles, and baking griddles stood ready near the hearth. For preservation, there might be mortars for grinding herbs and spices, or sieves for separating grain from chaff. Illuminated manuscripts sometimes show biblical figures at work: Mary spinning thread, Joseph carving wood, reminding us that medieval audiences saw labour as an integral part of family life. The tools were symbols of dignity as much as necessity. In this way, the home became a miniature economy, producing food, clothing, and goods for the household and sometimes for trade. Every tool had a purpose, and its place in the home told a story. Who worked here, what they made, and how they hoped to endure through another season. When we gather these details, the low doorway, the smoky rafters, the curtained bed, the few treasured tools, we begin to see that a medieval home was more than shelter. It was the physical expression of a family's position, values, and resilience. The poorest homes showed their hardship in every material choice. Smaller windows, thinner thatch, fewer possessions. But even here, care could be seen in swept floors, well-packed walls, or herbs hanging to dry. Wealthier peasants, by contrast, might display their prosperity in subtle ways: a glazed jug on a shelf, a larger bed with the feather pillows, a leaded glass window catching the light. Archaeology and manuscript art together reveal a truth that challenges stereotypes. Not all peasants lived in mud huts, and not all homes were dark and bare. In the 15th century especially, some families achieved a level of comfort above bare subsistence. They could invest in durable materials, own more than one table, or keep decorative items that served no practical purpose. Yet rich or poor, every home had the same fundamental goal: to keep its inhabitants alive, warm, and fed. The building was both a defence against the outside world and a stage for the dramas of everyday life: births, meals, quarrels, reconciliations. These structures, fragile as they might seem compared to stone castles, lasted in the memory of those who lived in them. They were repositories of routine, labour, and love. And even now, centuries later, their traces tell us that the measure of a medieval home was not in the value of its walls, but in the lives it sheltered. When I look at these homes, I don't just see timber and thatch, I see the heartbeat of an age. Castles may have survived in stone, but it was in these small smoky rooms that real life happened. Every worn bench, every patched roof, speaks more honestly about the Middle Ages than any gilded hall. If you want to keep exploring the hidden corners of history, subscribe to Medieval History, where the past still breathes.